Sarah Brodie for the Toronto Art Therapy Institute. Psychodynamic issues in theory and practice. Art therapy case example number 16. Countertransference. So in this case, I'm the case. I wanted to put on the table a discussion of how to work with countertransference and supervision, and to advocate for finding a very compatible supervision for you to be able to work with what comes up in your sessions, even if they're not, if you don't have a lot of art therapy work or psychotherapy work that you're doing in a week. Even when there are just a few people that you're working with when you're starting out, they tend to be, it fills your mind the rest of the week. And I like what Arthur Robbins wrote in the article that I assigned for reading, The Healing Space for Mental Health Professionals, when he says that when we do this work, and remember he's a creative arts therapist too, but in psychotherapy in general, that we're accepting a lifetime of countertransference processing. So, in one of the reasons I wanted to put this in the forum discussion is to get you guys thinking about how you'll find your peer group, because you're not in the same room. Obviously, in a distance learning platform, I think you have to be strategic. I don't know, more or less, but differently strategic about finding that cohort that you can use to process with. I think therapists are often people who process with their collaborators, connectors, relators, and I can certainly speak to that, like feeling that way myself, that I need to talk things through. So of course, therapy is a key tool, but in terms of wanting to pay attention to countertransference, there is nothing like group supervision, peer supervision, individual supervision for being able to walk through cases and what arose and what you felt from the patient and what it brought up in you. I've had that, I had a group supervision, just as you will, in my training on Friday afternoons. And it was such perfect timing, being able to look back at the week and then prepare for the week to come, prepare for groups, and how I would organize sort of group workshops or my prompts that I was going to be bringing into the women's shelter that I worked at, as well as later on when I was working in addictions. I was running a group where I would sort of bring themes or prompts, directives. Also, I kept this peer group that I gained in my group supervision from school, because I stayed in the same place. I stayed in Montreal after I graduated, and we kept meeting on Friday afternoons in a way that we kept up with one another as we started to all find work. And I'll just also say an aside that out of the 11 people that I studied with, I think 10 of us are working in the field. So, and I also, this is just a little rambling, but I want to say, like, I've paid for supervision privately. You do that to get your registration if you don't have it in the agency where you're working. But also it's rare to have an agency where there's an art therapist who can supervise you. So I've paid plenty for supervision, and actually just kind of called that a part of my operating costs in a week, is to have that time was just extraordinarily helpful for me to organize my thoughts in the session and be able to have a pocket that I could put things in in order to take them and deal with them. It helped to lighten my load while I was in the session, especially when working with very difficult clients who really test, and or when the work is more longer term and you're doing more this depth oriented psychotherapy, the the depth of feeling that will come up from doing deeper work like that is also very intense, pretty invariably, and it's been important for me to have that forum. I've never had a formal, after my training, I didn't have a formal group supervision that had a leader. Well, I had one with two of us, where we both worked in a hospital setting, both with the same population, and so we both joined up for supervision with somebody who had worked in that field for a long time. So I guess I did in that case, but it wasn't the same focus on countertransference that Arthur Robbins uses. I have had a mentor who has used that focus on countertransference, and I recommend you to well, first let's jam on the forum about how you imagine this going forward and what it means to you to use countertransference in your professional development, which certainly, like Arthur Robbins talks about, includes your personal development and how those two things connect. What is that looking like going forward? Are you networked into the community where you will be working? Do you know, are there people that you admire that you'd like to learn from in the community? It's such a great way of being able to plunk yourself down in front of somebody and have an hour of their time in exchange for what they ask for supervision and in payment, I mean. And then you can also gain from that person's knowledge of the network and the resources that you're going to be looking for work or referrals in. And also to cultivate a good peer network where I have people who I can call at the drop of a hat to discuss something that I'm struggling with. And it's very understood, the parameters of confidentiality and the focus on countertransference. It's not talking to outside of the confidentiality contract. It's really like working through my own questions of technique and also theory. Much like we're doing here, and I'm sure I'll be learning from the observations that you make of the little case materials and examples that I've provided you, just as you'll be learning from these real life experiences of mine too. So for this module, it's less about connecting these concepts and more about planning and thinking aloud of how we and how you might consider continuing this kind of dialogue past the end of your training. Because as I say, 10 years in, this is something I still seek out.